Hello and welcome to Stories of Science. Here, we look back on humanity's long journey to understand the world. The questions, the failures, and the breakthroughs that slowly changed how we see the universe and ourselves. We tell science as stories.
Mercury, the planet where the sun moves backwards. Have you ever imagined standing on a world where the sun can literally stop in the sky, then move backward like someone hit rewind on the universe? Welcome to Mercury, the strangest little troublemaker in the solar system. Most people think Mercury is just a tiny gray rock parked too close to the sun, but trust me, this planet is absolutely wild. It's less like a normal planet, and more like nature's cosmic prank. Picture this. You're standing on the surface, the ground beneath your boots is hot enough to fry breakfast. No pen needed, the sunlight is blinding, the sun looks more than 3 times bigger than it does from Earth, then suddenly, the sun slows down, stops, and starts moving backward across the sky. At that point, you'd probably be asking yourself, did the universe just glitch? And honestly, on Mercury, it kind of feels that way. Now imagine trying to jump. On Earth, maybe you hop a couple of feet. On Mercury, you'd launch upward like a superhero in slow motion, floating higher and longer thanks to the planet's weak gravity. Every step would feel like walking on a giant trampoline built by NASA. Look around, and the landscape feels almost unreal. Massive craters stretch to the horizon like scars from ancient cosmic battles, jagged cliffs cut across the surface like wrinkles on an old world that's been through too much. Some craters even sparkle in the sunlight, as if somebody scattered diamonds across a giant ash-covered desert. Mercury doesn't give up its secrets easily. It hides beside the sun like a sneaky neighbor who peeks through the curtains and disappears before you can wave hello. One moment it's visible in the twilight sky, the next it's swallowed by sunlight again. And that's what makes it fascinating. Because Mercury is a reminder that the universe never plays by human rules. Just when you think space should make sense, this little planet shows up and says, "Hold my asteroid." Today, we're diving headfirst into this bizarre world alongside the scientists who've spent decades trying to understand it. We're going to explore a planet where a single day lasts longer than an entire year, where daytime could melt lead, but nighttime could freeze you solid, where the sun performs optical illusions in the sky, and the ground looks like the aftermath of an interplanetary bar fight. So buckle up, because Mercury isn't just another planet. It's the solar system's speed demon, heat monster, time magician, and cosmic oddball all rolled into one. And honestly, compared to Mercury, science fiction starts looking a little lazy. Mercury doesn't just orbit the sun, it practically sprints around it like it's late for an appointment. Out of every planet in the solar system, Mercury is the undisputed speed champion. This tiny world tears through space at nearly 47 kilometers per second. That's fast enough to circle Earth in under 2 hours. To the Romans, speed meant one thing: Mercury, the messenger god. Honestly, they nailed the name. But here's where things get weird. Mercury's orbit isn't a neat little circle like most people imagine. It's stretched out like a rubber band somebody pulled too hard. At one point, Mercury swings incredibly close to the sun, then later drifts millions of kilometers farther away. That difference is enormous, around 14 million kilometers between its closest and farthest points. For comparison, Earth's orbit is way more stable. Mercury's path through space is more like a cosmic roller coaster with the safety bar missing. And the consequences are absolutely brutal. When Mercury swings close to the sun, the surface gets hot enough to melt lead. Daytime temperatures can hit 430 degrees Celsius. Then night arrives. And suddenly the planet turns into a frozen wasteland colder than Antarctica. On its worst day, temperatures crash to around minus 180 degrees Celsius. That's a temperature swing of over 600 degrees. Mercury basically lives by the phrase, when it rains, it pours. Except instead of rain, it's fire and ice. And somehow, the planet still gets stranger. Because Mercury's idea of time is completely broken. A year on Mercury, one full trip around the sun, takes only 88 Earth days, but a single day on Mercury, about 176 Earth days. Yep. On Mercury, a day lasts longer than 2 entire years. Imagine celebrating New Year's Day twice before the sun even finishes crossing the sky. That bizarre timing happens because Mercury is locked in something called a 3-to-2 resonance. For every 2 trips around the sun, the planet rotates exactly 3 times. Sounds harmless. But this creates one of the weirdest sky shows in the entire solar system. If you stood on certain parts of Mercury's surface, you'd watch the sun slowly rise, crawl across the sky, then suddenly stop. And then, it moves backward. Literally backward. Like the universe accidentally leaned on the rewind button. Scientists call this a result of Mercury's orbital speed and rotation syncing together in a very strange way, but if you were standing there in person, you probably wouldn't care about the physics. You'd just be staring at the sky saying nope, that's not supposed to happen. And Mercury would answer, too bad. Even sunrise behaves differently here. On Earth, the sun pops up and gets on with its day. On Mercury, sunrise is painfully slow. The sun creeps upward so gradually you could probably eat breakfast, take a nap, and still catch the same sunrise. Then suddenly the sky starts pulling magic tricks. This is why scientists sometimes call Mercury the time magician of the solar system. The planet bends your sense of motion, direction, even the meaning of a day itself. And Mercury's almost non-existent atmosphere makes everything even more extreme. There are no clouds. No rain. No weather forecasts. No cozy breeze. Its atmosphere is so thin that scientists barely call it an atmosphere at all. It's more like a ghostly veil made of scattered atoms: sodium, potassium, helium, hydrogen, constantly blasted away by solar radiation. In fact, Mercury even has a tail. Not kidding. The solar wind strips atoms off the planet and drags them behind it like a glowing cosmic scarf fluttering through space. But that thin atmosphere does absolutely nothing to protect the surface. So Mercury takes the full punch of the sun every single day. Radiation slams into the ground, ultraviolet light bakes the rocks, the temperatures swing wildly between pizza oven and deep freezer. And somehow, this tiny planet keeps racing around the sun like it's got somewhere important to be. Scientists sometimes joke that if Earth is a calm ballroom dancer, Mercury is a figure skater chugging espresso shots. Fast, chaotic, precise, and just a little unhinged. So if you ever stood on Mercury, your day would feel like surviving inside a science fiction fever dream. Morning, the sun rises in slow motion. At noon, the sun reverses direction. Night, the ground freezes hard enough to make steel complain. One tiny planet. One gigantic cosmic identity crisis. And yet Mercury keeps teaching us the same lesson over and over. The universe is under no obligation to behave normally. Mercury may be the smallest planet in the solar system, but don't let its size fool you. This little world is built like a cosmic cannonball. Its diameter is only about 4,879 kilometers, barely bigger than Earth's moon and less than half the size of Earth. If Earth were a basketball, Mercury would be more like a ping pong ball. But here's the twist. That tiny ping pong ball is unbelievably heavy for its size. It's the classic case of still waters run deep. Because beneath Mercury's battered gray surface lies one of the craziest interiors in the solar system, a gigantic iron core that dominates almost the entire planet. Scientists estimate that roughly 85% of Mercury's interior is made up of this massive metallic core. That's insane. Most rocky planets are a balance of rock and metal. Mercury, it's practically a giant ball of iron wearing a thin rocky jacket. Some astronomers jokingly call it the metal planet or the iron blueberry. Tiny on the outside, absolutely hardcore on the inside. And despite its small size, Mercury is incredibly dense, the second densest planet in the solar system after Earth. Which raises a big question. How does something so small pack so much punch? Well, Mercury probably had a violent childhood. Scientists think that billions of years ago, a colossal impact may have blasted away much of the planet's outer rock, leaving behind this oversized iron heart. Basically, Mercury may have survived a cosmic hit and run. And somehow, it kept going. Now let's talk gravity. Mercury's gravity is only about 38% as strong as Earth's. Which means if you can jump 1 meter on Earth, you could soar more than 2.5 meters on Mercury without even trying hard. Walking there would feel less like hiking, and more like bouncing across a giant dusty trampoline. One small hop for you. One giant headache for your knees. Scientists often joke that astronauts on Mercury would move around like superheroes in slow motion. And that weaker gravity changes everything on the surface. Loose rocks tumble slowly down crater walls, dust hangs in the air longer after impacts, even ancient lava behaved differently when it cooled billions of years ago. Mercury's landscape was shaped in a low-gravity world where everything happens just a little differently than we're used to. But the really fascinating part is deep underground. Because Mercury's giant iron core isn't fully solid. Part of it is still molten, a swirling ocean of liquid metal spinning inside the planet like a gigantic planetary engine. And believe it or not, that motion creates a magnetic field. Not a strong one, though. Mercury's magnetic field is only about 1% as powerful as Earth's. By cosmic standards, it's barely hanging on. But even a weak magnetic field can make a huge difference. At Mercury's poles, there are deep craters that sunlight never reaches. Inside those permanently shadowed regions, temperatures stay unbelievably cold. And hidden there? Water ice. On the planet closest to the sun. Yeah, space loves irony. That weak magnetic field helps shield some of that ice from the constant bombardment of solar wind, allowing it to survive in those dark frozen pockets for millions, maybe billions of years. So Mercury is basically a planet where you can have scorching heat hot enough to melt metal, and frozen water hidden in eternal darkness just a few hundred kilometers away. Talk about mixed signals. And Mercury's strange combo of low gravity and high density creates a surface unlike almost anywhere else. Tiny moonquakes and asteroid impacts can leave giant cracks stretching for miles. The crust slowly shrinks as the planet cools over time, wrinkling the surface like an old apple left out too long. Meanwhile, that enormous iron core keeps releasing heat from below, quietly shaping the planet from the inside out. Scientists study Mercury almost like it's a fossil from the early solar system, a preserved record of how planets formed when everything was hotter, more violent, and far more chaotic. If Earth is a polished modern city, Mercury is the old neighborhood that still remembers the street fights. And standing on Mercury would feel surreal. You'd bounce higher with every step, the ground beneath you would feel strangely rigid yet fragile. In the distance, icy patches hidden inside dark craters would sparkle against a landscape roasted by sunlight. A frozen secret hiding inside a furnace. Only Mercury could pull off something that weird. That's why scientists love this planet. Because Mercury proves something important. In space, size means absolutely nothing. Sometimes the smallest worlds carry the biggest secrets. At first glance, Mercury doesn't exactly look impressive. It's gray-scarred, covered in craters like an old punching bag floating through space. Honestly, if planets had popularity contests, Mercury would probably get ignored in the corner while Saturn showed off its rings. But here's the thing. Mercury is the perfect example of don't judge a book by its cover. Because beneath that dusty, battered surface lies one of the strangest interiors in the entire solar system. This little planet is basically a giant metal ball pretending to be a normal world. Scientists sometimes describe Mercury like a cosmic onion, layer after layer hiding something deeper and weirder underneath. The outer crust is surprisingly thin, only a few hundred kilometers thick, compared to the whole planet. That rocky shell is basically just paint on a cannonball. Underneath sits the mantle, a thick layer of superheated rock squeezed under enormous pressure, and below that, the real monster. A gigantic iron core that takes up around 85% of the planet's interior. That's absurd. For comparison, Earth's core is big, but Mercury's core practically is the planet. If Earth is an avocado, Mercury is more like a jawbreaker candy with barely any shell left. And this core isn't dead or solid. It's alive. Deep inside Mercury, molten iron and nickel are still swirling around like liquid metal inside a cosmic washing machine. That motion generates a magnetic field, kind of like a giant dynamo engine buried inside the planet. Now, Mercury's magnetic field is weak, really weak. Only about 1% as strong as Earth's. But even a weak shield is better than no shield at all. Especially when you live next door to the sun. Because the sun constantly blasts Mercury with radiation and solar wind like a cosmic pressure washer. Without protection, the planet would get stripped raw. Yet somehow, Mercury manages to hang on. And one of the biggest surprises hiding on this scorched world is ice. Real water ice. At the poles of Mercury are deep craters that never see sunlight, not once, not ever. Inside those permanent shadows, temperatures stay unbelievably cold, even while the rest of the planet is hot enough to melt metal. So Mercury ends up with one of the weirdest weather reports imaginable. Sunny with a chance of eternal darkness. And that weak magnetic field helps protect some of the ice trapped there from being blasted away into space. Which means this tiny world somehow became both a furnace and a freezer at the same time. Mercury really said, why choose one extreme when you can have both? Its interior also shapes the surface in dramatic ways. As Mercury cooled over billions of years, the giant iron core slowly shrank. And when the inside shrinks, the crust has to adjust. The result? The entire planet wrinkled. Gigantic cliffs called lobate scarps stretch across the landscape like wrinkles on an old apple drying in the sun. Some are hundreds of kilometers long. Imagine an entire planet slowly crumpling inward like a cooling pie crust. That's Mercury. Even stranger, scientists think the movement of Mercury's core may actually help maintain the planet's bizarre rotational rhythm, the same one responsible for the famous backward sun effect in its sky. So deep underground, Mercury's liquid metal heart may literally be helping control the rhythm of day and night. That means the core isn't just powering a magnetic field, it's helping choreograph the sky itself. That's not a planet anymore. That's a science fiction plot hiding inside a rock. And the mantle surrounding the core plays a huge role too. Early in Mercury's history, intense heat probably caused heavy metals to sink toward the center while lighter rock floated upward. That process helped create Mercury's incredible density and layered structure. In other words, Mercury became a natural laboratory for understanding how rocky planets are born. Scientists study it because it preserves clues from the early solar system back when planets were still forming, colliding, melting, and rearranging themselves in cosmic chaos. If you could slice Mercury open, it would look like some bizarre metallic fruit from another universe. A thin rocky skin, a thick rocky mantle, and a glowing oversized iron center humming quietly beneath it all. A tiny planet with the heart of a machine. And maybe that's the biggest lesson Mercury teaches us. The most ordinary looking things can hide extraordinary secrets. Because under that dull gray surface is a world powered by molten metal, shaped by ancient impacts, protected by a fragile magnetic shield, and hiding frozen water at the edge of eternal darkness. Mercury may be the smallest planet in the solar system, but inside? It's an absolute heavyweight. Mercury's surface looks like it lost a fight with the entire solar system. And honestly, that's basically what happened. This little planet has been getting hammered by space rocks for billions of years. No atmosphere, no weather, no oceans to erase the damage. Every crater is still sitting there like a fossilized scar from the early days of the solar system. If Earth is a living, changing world, Mercury is more like an ancient battlefield frozen in time. Stand on its surface, and the view would feel almost post-apocalyptic. Gray plains stretch endlessly in every direction, massive craters overlap each other like dents on an old car that's been through too many accidents, cliffs slice across the landscape, dust and shattered rock blanket the ground. It's less beautiful blue planet and more what in the universe happened here. And the craziest part? Some of Mercury's impact craters are even more extreme than the Moon's. We're talking about giant wounds carved into the planet by asteroids moving at terrifying speeds. Every crater tells a story. Some are tiny little pits just a few meters wide, others are so enormous they could swallow entire states or countries back on Earth. But one crater absolutely steals the show. The legendary Caloris Basin. Caloris Basin. This thing is gigantic, around 1,550 kilometers across. To put that into perspective, that's roughly the distance from northern to southern California. Imagine an asteroid impact so violent it shook the entire planet. Scientists think the collision released energy equivalent to millions of nuclear bombs exploding at once. Not exactly a rough day at the office. The impact was so powerful that lava flooded the region afterward, creating wide smooth plains inside the basin. Today, the center looks strangely flat compared to the rough terrain around it, almost like someone spilled molten rock into a giant cosmic frying pan. Some scientists joke it looks like a burned pizza from space. A very expensive pizza. And surrounding the basin are giant rings of mountains and ridges created by the shockwave of the impact itself. Mercury basically wears its trauma on the outside. But the surface gets even stranger. Because Mercury is shrinking. Seriously. Over billions of years, the planet's enormous iron core has slowly cooled, and as the inside cooled, the entire planet contracted. Imagine a grape turning into a raisin. That shrinking caused the crust to wrinkle and crack, forming huge cliff-like features called lobate scarps. Lobate scarps. These cliffs can stretch for hundreds of kilometers across the surface. It's as if Mercury has giant wrinkles from aging in cosmic slow motion. Scientists estimate the planet may have shrunk by about 7 kilometers in diameter over time. That may not sound like much, until you remember we're talking about an entire planet physically collapsing inward on itself. Mercury literally aged like an old leather jacket left out in the sun. And then there are the hollows. These might be the weirdest features on the planet. Hollows. Hollows are bright, shallow depressions scattered across Mercury's surface, often glowing with bluish or pale colors against the dark gray landscape. They look almost artificial, like somebody sprinkled glowing gemstones across a dead world. For a while, scientists had no idea what they were. Now they think these features formed when volatile materials beneath the surface vaporized and escaped into space, leaving behind strange reflective pits. In other words, parts of Mercury's surface are slowly evaporating away. Even after billions of years, the planet is still changing. That's wild. And because Mercury sits so close to the Sun, it exists in a dangerous neighborhood packed with fast-moving debris. Asteroids and comet fragments slam into it at incredible speeds. Without a thick atmosphere to protect the surface, even relatively small impacts leave lasting marks. Mercury became a giant cosmic punching bag. But here's the twist. Those scars are incredibly valuable to scientists. By studying crater sizes, shapes, and patterns, researchers can reconstruct the history of the early solar system, figuring out how often impacts happened, how violent they were, and how planets evolved over time. Mercury is basically a planetary crime scene that nobody cleaned up. And impacts aren't the whole story. Long ago, Mercury was also volcanically active. Huge floods of lava once poured across the surface, filling craters and creating smooth plains. So the planet wasn't just getting smashed from above. It was erupting from below too. Imagine a world constantly being reshaped by explosions from space and rivers of molten rock from underground. A cosmic construction site run by chaos itself. That's why Mercury's surface feels so surreal. One moment you're looking at ancient lava plains, the next, giant impact scars, then glowing hollows, then towering cliffs formed as the whole planet slowly shrank. Every rock feels like a page from a history book written in fire and violence. If you walked across Mercury, it would feel less like exploring a planet, and more like wandering through the ruins of the solar system's oldest memories. A gray world on the outside, but underneath? An epic story billions of years in the making. If you ever stood on Mercury hoping for a nice breeze, you'd be very disappointed. Because Mercury doesn't really have weather. No wind blowing across the plains. No clouds drifting overhead. No rainstorms. No snow. No atmosphere thick enough to even rustle a flag. In fact, calling Mercury's atmosphere an atmosphere is honestly being generous. It's more like a ghost. Scientists call it an exosphere, an ultra-thin layer of scattered atoms so sparse you wouldn't even notice it around you. Take a deep breath on Mercury? Bad idea. There's basically nothing there to breathe. Instead of thick air like Earth, Mercury only has tiny traces of atoms floating around: sodium, potassium, oxygen, helium, hydrogen. Not molecules, not actual breathable air. Just lonely atoms drifting through space like cosmic dust. And because Mercury sits so close to the Sun, the solar wind constantly blasts these particles away. The Sun is basically stealing Mercury's atmosphere piece by piece. Which creates one of the coolest things about the planet. Mercury has a tail. Yep, like a comet. Atoms stripped from the surface stream out behind the planet in a long glowing trail, almost like a delicate scarf fluttering in the solar wind. Not bad for a tiny gray rock everybody forgets about. But this missing atmosphere comes with serious consequences. Because without a thick blanket of air, Mercury has zero protection from temperature swings. On Earth, our atmosphere acts like insulation. It spreads heat around and softens extremes. Mercury doesn't get that luxury. Daytime temperatures can soar to around 430 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt lead. Then nighttime arrives, and temperatures plummet to -180 degrees Celsius. That's not a little chilly. That's your spacecraft is filing complaints gold. Mercury basically spends half its life inside an oven and the other half inside a freezer. It's like somebody installed the solar system's worst thermostat. And without a proper atmosphere, space rocks slam directly into the surface at full speed. On Earth, many meteors burn up in the atmosphere before reaching the ground. Mercury doesn't have that shield. Every incoming rock gets a VIP pass straight to the surface, which is why the planet is covered in craters. Tiny impacts, massive impacts, fresh scars, ancient scars. Mercury preserves them all like a scrapbook of cosmic violence. And scientists love that, because every crater tells a story. By measuring their size and shape, researchers can estimate how fast the impactors were moving, how large they were, and even what the early solar system looked like billions of years ago. Mercury is basically an untouched historical archive floating near the Sun. But the weirdness doesn't stop there. That ultra-thin exosphere also allows Mercury's surface materials to escape into space. When sunlight and radiation hit the ground, certain elements, especially sodium and potassium, get blasted free from the rocks. Those atoms drift upward and glow under sunlight, creating faint yellow and bluish halos around parts of the planet. It's subtle, beautiful, and incredibly strange. Almost like Mercury is quietly glowing from the inside out. Scientists track these glowing atoms to study how Mercury's surface changes over time. Because even though the planet seems dead and silent, it's still chemically active in tiny invisible ways. The surface is slowly evolving under the constant beating of solar radiation. Minerals break down, volatile materials evaporate, tiny hollows form in the crust. Mercury doesn't breathe like Earth does, but in a strange way, it still exhales, atom by atom. And if you stood there in person, the experience would feel surreal. You'd stretch out your hand and feel almost no air resistance at all. The sky would be pitch black even in broad daylight because there's no thick atmosphere to scatter sunlight above you. The sun would look enormous, more than 3 times larger than it appears from Earth, bright enough to feel almost hostile. Meanwhile, the ground beneath your feet would swing between scorching heat and brutal cold depending on where you stood. No wind. No sound from weather. Just silence. A silence so deep it would almost feel unnatural. And scattered across the landscape, sunlight would glint off crater walls and strange reflective hollows like tiny mirrors hidden in the dust. Mercury is the kind of place that makes science fiction look conservative. No breathable air. No mercy from the sun, no comfortable middle ground. Just raw physics pushed to the extreme. And that's exactly why scientists are obsessed with it. Because Mercury is one of the best natural laboratories in the solar system, a place where researchers can study radiation, impacts, planetary evolution, and extreme environments all at once. It's harsh. It's unforgiving. It's completely unreasonable. And somehow, that's what makes it beautiful. Mercury has always been the solar system's master of hide and seek. Try spotting it from Earth, and you'll quickly understand the problem. It never strays far from the sun, always buried in that blinding glare near the horizon. For thousands of years, astronomers could barely get a decent look at it. Even through early telescopes, Mercury was just a fuzzy little dot, mysterious, distant, and frustratingly hard to study. It was basically the universe saying you can look, but you can't touch. That finally changed in the 1970s. Humanity decided it was time to stop guessing and actually pay Mercury a visit. And the first brave scout sent into the fire was Mariner 10. Launched in 1973, Mariner 10 became the very first spacecraft to fly past Mercury. Between 1974 and 1975, it made 3 close flybys of the planet. Now, by today's standards, Mariner 10 was pretty limited. It couldn't orbit Mercury. It could only swoop past quickly, snap photos, and keep moving. Like a tourist leaning out of a speeding car trying to take pictures before missing the exit. But those images changed everything. For the first time in human history, we saw Mercury up close. And wow, it looked brutal. The spacecraft revealed a battered world covered in impact craters, giant cliffs, and enormous basins, including the monster known as Caloris Basin. Scientists suddenly realized Mercury wasn't some boring little rock near the sun. This planet had history written all over its surface. Ancient lava plains hinted at volcanic activity, gigantic scars suggested catastrophic impacts billions of years ago, massive cliffs showed the planet had actually shrunk over time. Mercury turned out to be far more complicated than anyone expected. But Mariner 10 only photographed about half the planet. The rest remained hidden in darkness like an unfinished puzzle. And for decades, that mystery stayed unsolved. Then came the next chapter, Messenger. And this mission completely changed the game. Messenger launched in 2004 and finally entered orbit around Mercury in 2011, staying there until 2015. Unlike Mariner 10, this spacecraft didn't just rush past, it moved in. Think of Mariner 10 as somebody peeking through the window. Messenger kicked down the front door and started taking inventory. For the first time ever, scientists mapped the entire planet in incredible detail. And Mercury immediately started showing off secrets nobody expected. Messenger confirmed the existence of water ice hiding inside permanently shadowed polar craters on the closest planet to the Sun. That discovery alone sounded like science fiction. The mission also discovered strange bright features called halos, measured Mercury's weak magnetic field, and analyzed the chemistry of its crust. Sodium, potassium, sulfur, calcium. Suddenly Mercury wasn't just a dead gray rock anymore. It became a living laboratory of planetary science. Scientists learned that Mercury's magnetic field, weak though it is, helps protect ice trapped in polar shadows. They discovered evidence of ancient volcanic activity. They mapped cliffs formed as the planet shrank over billions of years. Every new dataset made Mercury stranger. And then Messenger had one of the most dramatic endings in space exploration history. Eventually, the spacecraft ran out of fuel. No fuel meant no way to maintain orbit. So NASA did the only thing left to do. They crashed it into Mercury on purpose. After years of orbiting the planet, Messenger ended its mission by slamming into the very world it had spent so long studying. Even in death, it gave scientists useful data. Talk about dedication to the job. Messenger basically said, if I'm going down, I'm taking notes on the way. And now we've entered the newest chapter in Mercury exploration, Bepi-Colombo. This mission, launched by the European Space Agency and Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, is the most ambitious Mercury project ever attempted. Bepi-Colombo isn't just one spacecraft. It's a full scientific tag team. One part studies Mercury itself, another studies its magnetic environment and interaction with the solar wind. Together, they're trying to answer some huge questions. How does Mercury's magnetic field really work? What's happening inside the giant iron core? How does the solar wind constantly reshape the planet's surface? And how can ice survive on a world hot enough to melt metal? The mission is essentially creating the ultimate high-definition portrait of Mercury. Scientists want everything: surface maps, chemical composition, magnetic field measurements, topography, temperature changes, even tiny seasonal shifts in the polar ice. Mercury has officially gone from mysterious dot in the sky to scientific gold mine. But getting there is incredibly difficult, because flying near the Sun is no joke. Spacecraft around Mercury must survive brutal radiation, extreme heat, and dangerous gravitational forces. One tiny mistake in navigation, and the Sun could literally pull the spacecraft into oblivion. Building these missions requires insane engineering precision. Heat shields, advanced navigation systems, complex orbital calculations. Mercury isn't just a challenge for scientists. It's an engineering nightmare wrapped inside a physics exam. And honestly, that's part of what makes it so fascinating. This tiny planet near the Sun has pushed humanity's technology to its limits. From the blurry glimpses of early astronomers, to Mariner 10's quick snapshots, to Messenger's global maps, to Bepi-Colombo's deep investigation, every mission peeled back another layer of Mercury's mystery. And every time we look closer, the planet somehow gets even stranger. A world of fire and ice. A shrinking planet with a giant metal heart. A place where the Sun moves backward in the sky. Not bad for a tiny gray rock nobody used to care about. Mercury, even the name sounds fast. The Romans named it after Mercury, the swift-footed messenger god who could zip between worlds in the blink of an eye. And honestly, they nailed it. This little planet tears around the Sun at nearly 47 kilometers per second, faster than any other planet in the solar system. By the time you finish snapping your fingers, Mercury has already raced thousands of kilometers through space. Talk about being here today, gone tomorrow. And fittingly, Mercury itself is hard to catch. It hugs so close to the Sun that for most of human history, it played cosmic hide-and-seek with astronomers. One moment it appears low in the twilight sky, the next it vanishes into the sun's glare like a magician slipping backstage. Ancient skywatchers probably thought this thing had a personality disorder. But speed is only part of Mercury's madness. If you stood on its surface and looked up, the Sun would look absolutely monstrous, roughly 3 times larger than it appears from Earth, and several times brighter. Forget sunglasses. You'd need the kind of SPF that belongs in a sci-fi movie. The sunlight there doesn't just warm you up, it feels personal. And that brutal sunlight creates one of the craziest temperature swings in the solar system. During the day, the ground can heat up to around 430 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt lead. Then night falls, and temperatures crash to about minus 180 degrees Celsius. Mercury doesn't believe in moderation. It's either air fryer or deep freezer. No middle ground. Yet somehow, this tiny planet became one of the most valuable scientific treasure chests in space. Here's the weird part: Mercury is small, only a little bigger than Earth's moon, but it's ridiculously dense. Scientists discovered that an enormous chunk of the planet is basically one giant iron core. It's like cracking open a small fruit and finding almost nothing but metal inside. That tells researchers something huge may have happened billions of years ago. Maybe a giant collision stripped away much of Mercury's outer rock. Maybe the early solar system was even more chaotic than we imagined. Either way, Mercury is basically a fossil from the birth of the planets. That's why scientists are obsessed with it. Studying Mercury is like finding the original blueprint for rocky worlds. Every crater, every cliff, every magnetic field measurement gives clues about how planets form, cool down, shrink, and survive near violent stars. In a way, Mercury is less like a planet and more like a time capsule left over from the solar system's construction site. And despite looking battered and lifeless, Mercury still has surprises hiding in plain sight. Its magnetic field is weak, only about 1% as strong as Earth's, but it still exists. That means deep inside, its metallic core is at least partially molten and still moving. Imagine a tiny planet-sized engine quietly humming away for billions of years. Even crazier, at Mercury's poles, hidden inside permanently shadowed craters, scientists found water ice. Yes, ice. On a planet hot enough to roast metal. That's the kind of plot twist Mercury loves to pull. NASA's Mariner 10 gave humanity its first close-up look in the 1970s. Later, Messenger completely changed the game by orbiting Mercury and mapping the entire planet. And now Colombo is continuing the investigation, trying to uncover how Mercury's magnetic field, surface, and violent solar environment all interact. Every mission has revealed another layer of this strange little world. And honestly, Mercury feels less like a normal planet and more like nature showing off. Extreme heat, extreme cold. A giant metal heart. A backwards moving Sunday, frozen water hiding in eternal darkness. A planet sprinting around the sun like it's late for an appointment. Truth is stranger than fiction has never fit a planet better. Mercury may be the smallest planet in the solar system, but it punches far above its weight. It reminds us that the universe doesn't care about playing it safe. Sometimes the weirdest places turn out to be the most important. And maybe that's the real lesson hiding out there beside the sun. Never judge a world by its size. And just like that, our wild road trip around Mercury comes to an end. We've crossed a world where daytime can melt metal and nighttime can freeze you solid. We've flown over giant impact craters, glowing hollows, endless cliffs, and a planet-sized iron heart hiding beneath a battered gray surface. Tiny Mercury may look like a forgotten rock beside the sun, but as the saying goes, still waters run deep. This little world is packed with some of the biggest mysteries in the solar system. And maybe that's what makes Mercury so fascinating. It lives in one of the harshest neighborhoods imaginable. The heat is brutal. The radiation is relentless. The landscape looks like the aftermath of a cosmic war. And yet, beneath all that chaos, the laws of physics move with perfect precision, like the gears of an ancient clock that never misses a beat. Mercury reminds us that the universe doesn't operate on comfort. It operates on rules. Even the strangest things, a sun that appears to move backward, ice hiding on a scorching planet, a tiny world with a gigantic metallic core, all follow patterns written into the fabric of nature itself. The deeper we look, the more the universe stops feeling random and starts feeling beautifully connected. That's why scientists keep sending spacecraft there. Not just for maps, not just for measurements, but because every mission is really asking a bigger question. How much of the universe can humanity truly understand? Probes like Mariner 10, Messenger, and Bapai-Colombo aren't just machines. In a way, they're extensions of human curiosity, tiny explorers carrying one very human idea into the darkness. We want to know. And Mercury, silent and scarred, answers in whispers. Every crater is a memory, every cliff is evidence, every strange sunrise is a reminder that space is far weirder than our imagination ever expected. Because in the end, exploration isn't only about finding answers, sometimes, it's about learning how big the questions really are. Mercury may be small, lonely, and unforgiving, but it holds up a mirror to humanity itself. A species standing on one small planet, staring into the firelight of the cosmos, still curious enough to ask, what's out there?
The people who change the world usually just think one step deeper. If this story made you see things differently, hit like, subscribe, and save it. See you in the next story.